when this kind of stuff happens like this, the church looks like an absolute laughingstock. Like, this is not God's heart. These people are not operating in God's heart, 100%. And for somebody that has walked through that and questioned that, I can say with absolute confidence that that is not God's heart. God is not one to abuse people. And these people, a platform does not equal anointing.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
If there's not financial transparency at churches, like if you don't know what your pastor is making, that's probably a red flag, yeah.
I get to roll us in?
Roll us in.
Oh, what a gift.
It's
Sir.
generous.
So generous. Hey, everyone. It's Lauren and Ian with Living Mosaic. I feel like I'm going really fast. All I hear is like, why do I have voices in my head? Do you have voices in your head?
I don't know.
Like giving you cues?
Same way that you do, but I mean, maybe.
And when you're rolling us in, do you hear like cues in your head of different things you could say, or do you just automatically know what you're going to say?
I generally just know what I'm going to say and go with it. And I've also done a lot of YouTube videos, so like I have more experience. So
this is true. Because I hear like announcers off the side in my ears, or like I picture like Anchorman like roll-ins. I want little cue cards. I can be a news anchor. Are you sure you want to do this with me?
I'm positive.
And we're back.
We're going back. Stop.
Welcome back to Living Mosaic. I was doing it.
Oh my gosh.
This is episode 5. Cool. Episode 5. Take 105.
Welcome back to the Living Mosaic podcast. We are continuing our series on deconstruction that we've called the Scarlet D. And I don't know that we even really talked about the title.
I don't know if we did.
Yeah. So obviously it's a play off of the Scarlet Letter.
Obviously. I mean, if you
have any
of that. If you know literary references, which actually you came up with it, there is a good chance
that other people might know it as well.
I mean, in our generation, I think all of us had to read it in school. Did you read it in school?
I don't remember.
So yeah, we were doing the play off of the Scarlet Letter with Hester and the fact that she had to wear an A. But we turned it into a D.
For deconstruction.
Deconstruction.
And just the fact that it has become somewhat of a negative thing within a lot of the church world, viewed as how people, they just don't like the church, or they want to just go off and do whatever they want. And so many of these kind of, connections that it has and the stigma that it seems to have. And we're wanting to just open up the discussion and say that people can go through this process, that they can question, that they can have difficulty in life that leads them to question, and it not be this horribly negative thing, and they're not horrible and all that. So that's really the whole kind of the premise of this whole series. And we are going to continue from last time whenever we were talking about the reasons why people deconstruct.
Yeah. Also, if you just listen to us and we're only in your ear holes, the intro to every podcast where there's like a musical, like
45 seconds of just dead music.
there's actually video
Yeah.
of me with a Scarlet D.
Yeah, we shot kind of a cool cinematic intro. So if you're continuing to listen to the series and you're just going, what is the deal with that? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Maybe like watch it on YouTube or on Spotify. There's videos.
Yeah. It's on our Instagram.
Even just that intro part, just because we put some effort and thought into that and
Yeah.
how it turned out. So go check that out.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
But you were going to say we were discussing today some of the different things that may create a catalyst moment outside of like a personal, right?
Yeah.
It's a really convoluted way to say it. Sorry. It's been an interesting morning there.
Yes, basically what causes people to deconstruct, why people question faith, all of that. Last time we talked about teachings within the church that can lead people to question. And I think before we fully dive into that, there's something that we wanted to just to kind of like discuss real quick that was brought up by one of Lauren's friends. And it was kind of the question of, well, kind of what you're describing sounds like just having discernment about teachings and churches and all that kind of stuff. And so, what's really the difference between deconstruction and discernment? Why not just call it discernment? Yeah. And I think, we kind of discussed that and took it to heart, and we're like, okay, well, here's kind of our thoughts on that. So we're going to use an example. It's kind of a little bit more extreme, but at the same time, I think it can apply to
a lot of things
in churches technically too. But let's say you have a cult and you have somebody who is integrated into the cult. They, maybe they were brought up in the cult by their parents.
Yeah. They didn't have a choice. It was just their world.
And so that is their world structure. And when they begin to see through all of the, whatever, the veil, and they start to question, and then they start to deconstruct. They pull away and they go, I don't know if I believe that anymore. They break it all down, they deconstruct it, they evaluate it, and then they decide, the pathway moving forward.
Yep.
So you have that person, and that would be an example of deconstruction. And then you have somebody that approaches the cult from outside, and they
gets an invitation in and has the experience that he had.
Yeah.
As a young boy. If you haven't listened to that, go find our coffee chat about his cult experience.
Yeah. And they can look at it more from an objective perspective, and they have discernment. They evaluate and go, oh, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of the two big differentiators, is that you have people who are more integrated and assimilated into certain things that are not perhaps correct, and even like not necessarily that everybody who deconstructs, maybe they are going to a good church, but then they have something.
But bad teachings, and culturally bad teachings. I feel like we'll talk about certain things like in the future, but like the purity culture movement was a cultural movement. I mean, even the schools.
Yeah, we're jumping
on the abstinence. That's a whole other thing. But that was taught mainstream and in church, and then the people who got it from both sides, it was a part of their ethos in a different way.
Yeah.
And they had to go, what do I actually believe about sexuality because of what they were taught? And you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And so that's kind of one of the big differentiators, is that discernment is definitely something that's good, that's necessary, but there is a differentiator, because I feel like deconstruction, it's usually like you're far more assimilated into whatever it is that you're then pulling out of and deconstructing.
Yep.
Again, I think that, personally, I think that a lot of the reason why people do go through the process of deconstruction is some sort of catalyst, some sort of pain or trauma that kind of either, whether it's from whatever cultural institution that they're a part of and deconstructing from, because this doesn't have to apply just to church technically. I mean,
Yeah.
you can have people that perhaps are like completely integrated into politics on one side or the other, and then they have a deconstruction moment from that. I mean, this can apply to so many different things. But usually there is a event or a course of events that lead you to question what it is you believe. And so that's kind of what we're going to dive into in part 2 today.
Yeah.
Is that, and what are we going to be talking about?
Well, it's going to be about different, like, church events or ministry or honestly cultural events. Like, I know a lot of people deconstructed because of the election with Trump 3 terms ago or whatever it was. Like in 2016, like I knew people deconstructing because they didn't like that Trump became a figurehead for the evangelical church.
Mm-hmm.
So like it doesn't have to be necessarily a church scandal. It could be a massive life event.
Yeah.
That people then relook at stuff and go, wait, I don't know if I agree with how that's panning.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. There's any number of things that can trigger that. And so I think we're going to jump in. I think, one of the big ones that's really obvious is like church scandals.
Yes.
And
or ministry scandals as well.
Yeah. I think that, this isn't necessarily anything new. If you read in Revelation, when the letters to the churches, there's a discussion about, this person here, or this behavior, you guys are acting like the Nicolaitans and stuff like that, where you have this kind of these things where humans are being humans all throughout history. I know it's wild.
No,
it's wild.
That's crazy.
I would have never thought.
No.
And so this is not a new thing. I do feel like, specifically here in the Western church, that there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot being exposed. I feel like God is kind of shaking things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I feel like you can't, as many years as I can look back, there has been some sort of scandal within the church. Different scalable, like different things, but like I can think of, when Gateway sent a pastor to a church in Colorado. I cannot remember the pastor's name, but he had been caught in an illicit affair.
Yeah. And it was right after he got there that there was that shooting at the church too. Yeah, that was wild.
That was a wild time. That actually was part of my YWAM story.
Yeah, I can't remember what was his name. I'm like totally blanking.
Brady Boyd.
Boyd, yeah,
is the pastor that.
Currently,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is he still there?
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah,
But he came from Gateway, which is another scandal. And that is actually one of the churches we were faithfully attending at one point.
Yeah, I was working there as an intern. I went on trips. I was in the missions department, went on a lot of trips.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I didn't, like, you don't necessarily always see it when you're in it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even say that, even like 5 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily have even said that Gateway was a toxic church or that there was all these major problems there. It was just, it wasn't the right fit for us anymore at that time. But then kind of as we went through our deconstruction process, I began to kind of look back at that and really see some of the behavior and go, I really wouldn't be surprised if there was I said it, not even like 6 months before this all broke, that I was like, something's going to come out about something. I knew something was coming. So not to say that like I'm all prophetic and stuff, but no, just reading. Discernment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it does, like they kind of intermingle in a lot of ways too. It's like you have to have discernment when you're going through deconstruction. But
sure,
deconstruction a lot of times involves that dark night of the soul moment that leads you to it. And church scandal can be a huge catalyst.
Oh, for sure. Because I think if we had been at Gateway still, it would have been crushing for us. Like whenever the news broke.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was gutting when the news hit, and we hadn't been an active member of Gateway in a decade.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, it was shocking. It was.
Yeah, he got out. I had left the restaurant to nurse a baby because it was crowded, not because I don't like nursing in public.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there. It was just easier to go to the car. And I was scrolling, and a person that we follow had made a comment, and I was like, he is referencing something. What is he referencing?
Yeah.
And I immediately started Googling, and it, like, article after article started popping up, and I was like, oh my word.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he got in the car, I was like,
I thought somebody had died.
yeah,
Honestly.
because I was like in shock
Yeah.
of what had just been dropped. And I can't imagine, like, so if you are a past member of Gateway or a current member of Gateway, like, we are gutted alongside you.
Yeah.
It's never good to see a man on a pedestal who is supposed to be a man of God fall.
Yeah, I mean, and it's never good to see this happen to anybody. And I think obviously a lot of the things that come out are horrible, hated, like disgusting things, and the tendency is to get very repulsed, angry at the people, and really put a lot of effort into anger towards them and pushing them away. And there's all sorts of people out there in podcasts, and like, I get it, but who are very much just hammering on these people and all of this stuff. And it's kind of like finding that balance between having, making sure that we're holding people accountable, we're holding these leaders accountable.
Absolutely.
That like, this can't happen. This can't continue happening. We have to have transparency. We have to have oversight.
I mean, that's absolutely. And the thing is, like, we don't attract the world to the gospel and to God when we are hiding filth.
Yeah.
Like, because discernment, like, Ian could sense something was going to drop. Like, we, as humans, like, we are trained to recognize things and to pick up on things.
And to see, like, we have an innate ability to sense the BS.
Yeah.
And
impending doom is something that, like, it's a hardwired, like, survival.
Yeah. And that, I think, yeah, we're gonna, I think, fully dive into this about when this kind of stuff happens, like this, the church looks like an absolute laughingstock, and like,
yeah,
and for right reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if we hadn't already started our journey back to the church, that bomb this summer of Gateway
could have just pushed us fully under, sealed the fate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, sure. If we hadn't already integrated back into a church community and had people walking alongside us.
I mean, and the encounters with God that we've had and all these different things. But yeah, it definitely, it drives people away. It absolutely does, without a doubt. And that's the thing where, leaders, if you genuinely care about people and about the kingdom and about God, you have to take this seriously. It's just, and we're just doing a podcast here. But even in that, like, we were talking about this morning, that we have people that we're submitted to, that we want their feedback on. And if we say anything that is like,
that they're like, oh
yeah, we want to know, and we're both in relationship with groups of people, and we have accountability, and we have all of that, because it's so important. I'm much too afraid of God to screw it when it comes to so much of, it's just, I mean, when we're diving into any sort of, like,
if we're gonna lead, if we're gonna be leading people in a faith realm, we should hold that with great care and reverence. The verse of, it's better to tie a millstone around your neck than to lead one of these astray or to harm one of these little ones. Like, yes, that totally goes for, like, people who physically harm children, but also God says that like we are like his children. So like,
Yeah.
so when a leader of a ministry or a church does something that causes people to walk away and not just like leads them to a false gospel, which is bad,
Yeah.
but causes people to turn and go, I want nothing to do with the gospel you're speaking of.
Yeah, like that, they're directly responsible in a lot of ways for that. Obviously, like people are responsible for their own decisions and to, question to walk away and etc. But
that impacts, it does impact.
Leaders have a hand in it too.
And I mean, the verse or the commandment, like, don't take the Lord's name in vain. I have a hard time believing that has anything to do with saying GD. I don't like saying GD.
Ideal to say.
Yeah, not saying. But when just like I took Ian's last name and I became a Miller, like if I take God's name and I choose to become a Christian, and then I do things that are against him, in
vain, in vanity, in self-serving,
then that is not
emptiness.
Yeah, that's not being a true representative. That's the word. Of God. And so I think when church leaders get elevated, and we see it on a greater scale now because of this lovely platform and ability.
Social media,
and so we have, so in the 90s, we knew of Hillsong Church because of Darlene Check's, what was her song? Shout to the Lord. You probably don't know that song.
I mean, I know it.
Yeah,
retroactively, but like, I wasn't there
in the beginning, whenever like
the OG beginning of it.
Yeah. When Hillsong music was first becoming popular, and we knew it because that traveled, but we didn't know all the intricacies of Hillsong Church. But now in 2020 or 2024, no, we're in 2025.
We are now.
Crazy. Now here, like, we know some of the other darker, seedier sides of Hillsong. I mean, and that, to get into that here now, but that's the thing. Like,
social media has, it's created a whole nother level of both transparency into ministries, expedient of information moving very quickly, but it also, I think it's on the flip side, it has
celebrity-fied?
Yeah.
Not a word.
Celebrified.
Maybe celebrified. That's probably better.
We invented a new word.
There we go.
But yeah, it's given so much more access to people to where they can build this platform and this following, and it's like where there's greater visibility, there's also greater like hiding and these personas that people put on. And again, I'm not trying to say that everybody does that, but with the things that we're seeing in the statistics, it's honestly, and to go back to my point before of all these things are happening and we're discussing them, and we want to be aware and we want to, stand for justice and say this is not right.
Yep.
But the why we're doing it is important because we need to be ensuring that our motives in discussing these scandals and addressing them is not just out of like anger and bitterness, because I did that, he operated in that, and it doesn't produce fruit. And so our goal is like, we want to, in a lot of ways, first and foremost, help the victims of these to walk through this so that maybe they don't have to go through everything. Maybe they don't have to deconstruct. Maybe they can learn from our stories and find that, this is not God's heart. These people are not operating in God's heart 100%. And for somebody that has walked through that and questioned that, I can say with absolute confidence that is not God's heart. God is not one to abuse people. And these people, a platform does not equal anointing.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Because I mean, I know when we left Gateway, it wasn't because of anything against Gateway, but we had followed another pastor. And I associated at my mid-20s, I had a few friends who had really encouraged the church, I had one of the elders at Gateway that I really looked up to. I had babysat his grandkids, who had said, given the stamp of approval on this person, and he had a platform. So I was like, he's got to be safe. Like, I assumed we were going from a safe place to a safe place.
Yeah.
Only to realize neither place was safe.
Yeah.
And so just because they grew, because a lot of people will say, well, God wouldn't allow them to grow if
he wasn't doing something in that and all that.
Yeah.
And that's also not to say that God wasn't working in those churches, because we're people who genuinely, like, there's, we went there. There's tons of people at all of those churches that we were a part of that had these issues and these scandals, that there's tons of people who genuinely loved, pursued God, were there to build the kingdom. I mean, a lot of people I worked with directly were like that. They were phenomenal. They love the Lord. And that's the thing, is that God shows up for his church, even if there's parts of his church that are in an institution that's unhealthy. Because the reality is, people can, you can build a business that's really successful.
Yeah.
And you can be a motivational speaker who's really successful. And that has nothing to do with God's anointing or blessing on you. I mean,
and that's, so the whole, like, his gifts are irrevocable. Like, you are designed with propensities that is just innately in you, because that's how you were designed.
Yeah.
And how you choose to exercise them, how you choose to build them out, how you choose, like, that's on you.
Yeah.
And like the universe was designed in such a way, this is where I go back to, like, I use creator a lot and universe a lot. Like, we were like, the universe was designed to operate in a certain way.
Yeah.
So, like, the laws of, like, attraction, different things, like, whether or not, depending on how you say it can be a spiritual, like, Christianese thing, or it can be a New Age thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, when you are grateful, when you are generous, when you are, like, there is a return that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, just out of how the world was designed, how the universe was designed. And so just because the motivational speaker who slapped some Christianese and did all the things, like, it does work, because that's just how the universe operates.
Yeah. And I think
it doesn't give him a free pass to say that it was God's stamp, is what I'm getting at.
And then I think the even bigger thing, and I think sometimes the part of it that's harder to grapple with whenever you've gone through these things, is that we're seeing just like one frame of the whole roll of film.
Yep.
And God's ways are not our ways, and he, I think in ways, and obviously this is speculative of the situation, but it's like God may have had a plan for all of these people that involved them actually being righteous men, really effective in ministry, and along the way, like, these things happen, and God's I mean, who knows what's going on behind the scenes? I mean, I don't see how, like, his conscience, I don't even know. Like, God gives us all these opportunities to repent, to turn, and all these things. And it's not as though he's going to just immediately remove people from what they're doing when they're operating in hiddenness. And so, as Paul even said, like, sure, these people are preaching the gospel only to stir up strife and make my life more difficult, but who cares? The gospel is being preached.
Yeah.
And, I never want to say something like that to diminish the victims and what has happened to people, but and certainly not say that, like, God allowed or caused that to happen so that XYZ. I don't believe that is the case. I believe that humans make horrible choices, and God will redeem that. He is the just for the victim. He stands for justice, and that he can turn anyone around no matter what they've done. I mean, Ted Bundy became a believer after his horrible things, and I believe that, is he dead?
Yeah.
So I believe that he's in heaven.
Yeah.
And nobody's beyond redemption, but that the story is not done. and we don't know. And whenever we try to make assumptions, because that's, I think in a lot of ways what I did is I tried to make assumptions that God is bad because this one thing happened or these things happened. And, where we are now is a testament to the fact that God is going to use what happened to help other people. I mean, we've already seen it. We've already interacted with people who have gone through similar things with CSA and all these things. I mean, we'll get into that at some point about like some of the feedback that Lauren's gotten. I mean, she's literally like saved people's lives with some of her blogs. And so we can't even fathom what God is doing behind the scenes.
And that's the thing is like, so there's been a few different times like I have wrestled with God in this like specific thing of like, God, I don't understand why this person who has caused so much harm still has a voice, and that it even appears that like God is using them, or God has used them. And it was one of those. So C.S. Lewis in I think A Horse and His Boy makes a statement. One of the characters is walking with Aslan, who is archetype for Christ, if you've not read the Narnia series. And the child's asking, well, what about this child's like story? And Aslan goes, that's not for you to know. Like, that's between that child and I. And I was wrestling at one point, and God was like, you don't know what I'm doing. You don't know why I have elevated here and done this here. And there was there was a piece of me that when the Gateway scandal broke, there was this piece of like, because the victim had been crying out. The victim had gone to multiple people. I mean, the Daystar staff apparently knew about it before it broke by like 6 months, I think. Something crazy like that. Yeah, like it's messy. Because she had been trying to get her story heard. And I really do believe that there is an element of him rising to the prominence that he was able to rise to is actually going to change systemic things, because it can't be ignored now. The awful things that have happened through the IMB and in the SBC, so International Mission Board and Southern Baptist Convention, with or the Catholic Church, or the shuffling of abusers, there's a tipping point where it can't be ignored anymore. And I think we're in that tipping point with a lot of,
and it's causing the absolute necessity for things to change. And a lot of institutions have risen to that, and they've made a lot of changes, and
it's not going to be perfect. And
it takes time. And I think again, it's very easy to get angry and push blame, and and we've been there, but I think we're at a point now where it's like we can have a degree of empathy for those who are trying to manage the situations, and
they're trying to be the change, but it's hard.
I mean, you're dealing with so many different factors and so much, and you don't have necessarily all the facts. You don't have all, and so I think to be encouragers, and obviously, like, we need to stand for truth and stand for justice and all these things. But I think there's just a need for a degree of grace, and as well discussions. I think are so important, because in a lot of ways, like, this is unknown waters, and I
think of what I tell the boys all the time. I've never had to parent a kid in this stage. You've never been a human at this stage. Like, we're all just learning along in life. And so, although in my early 20s, late 20s, I assumed if you had a place of prominence, like,
you had it all figured out, and you
were doing like, as a kid, I never thought my parents were just winging it. My kids know I'm just winging it. I tell them.
No. And so I think that's where,
we have to give grace.
We have to give grace.
Not like he's that word. We have to give understand. Like, we have to be willing to sit in the tension of disagreement or uncomfortableness without cutting off the people who are trying.
Yeah, yeah, and as well, like allow people to perhaps make mistakes in the process, but as long as they have the humility to correct mistakes, stuff like that. And so there's a difference between mistakes and like major things and crimes and stuff like that.
Well, it's that, and also like, so yeah, mistakes and like known crime.
Yeah, there's a point whenever people should not be in ministry anymore,
And also, yeah.
But
So if you're a pedophile, if you are embezzling money from your church,
well, if there's a law broken, you probably
shouldn't be in leadership. But like if you're,
at the very least, that's the standard.
So I can make a mistake as a mom. I can yell at my kids and not represent, myself in the way that I want to with my kids. And I can be abusive as a mom.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference. Like, but the difference is I come back and I go, hey guys, botched that.
Yeah.
My bad.
Humility
I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
One, will you forgive me? And two, can we do that over?
Yeah.
That's very different than how dare you say I wasn't nice to you?
Yeah.
How dare you point out the fact that I yelled? Like,
yeah.
That's abusive. Like you're gaslighting. You're doing all that.
Mm-hmm.
So when a leader within an institution is met with like, hey, that didn't land well.
Yeah.
If you get met back with defensive-ness, if you get back, like that's
verbal abuse and stuff like that, like power dynamics and manipulation and all those things like that happens too, because not every church scandal is some major sexual abuse thing or whatever. There's plenty that involve power and there was the whole Mars Hill thing, which is a whole podcast on that. We're not going to dive into that. We tend to, I would say, like, we may address other things, but for the most part we're going to be
sticking to ours.
Yeah, and Mars Hill is somewhat our story because we had friends that went there up in Seattle. And we listened to teachings.
Again, the ability to podcast and different things.
Yeah.
Like, I had direct influence from Mars Hill, from Elevation, because I listened to those teachings.
Exactly. And so that's where, like, we want to say that we're not going to just be discussing all these scandals in part to get, like, clicks or whatever, but we want to talk about, like, share our story because that's our story and how they impacted us and how
technically Mark Driscoll came through Gateway while we were still there.
Yeah.
Because he was platformed within, like, a millisecond after he was removed from authority at Mars Hill.
Yeah. And I would say he was never repentant about what had happened and put back into a full church leadership position after less than a year. So that's where we have a real issue is it's just a reshuffling, and people are, when they don't have that humility to, and I genuinely don't know that he believes that he was wrong, but
I've not followed him.
Yeah, I mean, and I just mainly from the Mars Hill podcast and what he said in response to all of that, but and that's a prime example of like a more of a manipulation and a spiritual abuse and just verbal abuse and those kind of things where
there was financial abuse too.
Well, yeah, I guess that's fair. Everything that's sexual
that we know of.
Yeah,
except he taught really. Never mind.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah,
just go listen to the Mars Hill podcast.
Yeah,
if you're interested in learning about more of that kind of stuff.
And the thing is, I think there is actually benefit to understanding
why things happen and happen. I do, and that's where
because I think there's the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. There's Bodies Behind the Bus podcast that's really good. There's Church Disrupted, and some of them are very specific about an event or a type, but a lot of it is also you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that something is abusive, you don't know, like, then you don't recognize it in your own life.
Yeah. And that's where, again, like, there's a difference between discernment, because, like, discernment can be hard in these situations because, to a degree, there's a level of trust that you put into a leader who has a following because you're like, okay, well, they must know something if they've developed, if this church has grown and all this and God is working and all that. Like, you somewhat, you have to be trusting. I mean, that's part of faith is a level of trust in the people that are within that faith, that are sharing, that are leading. And so that's where it can be hard, especially as a new believer.
Well, and
You
that
know,
one of the feedback that I got at one point was, there's a difference for someone who was born and raised in the faith,
mhm,
and it's everything you are, because it's literally from birth to someone who comes into the faith later in life.
yeah,
Like their deconstruction may look very different, or their discernment, or their,
exactly.
because like it permeated my entire
Yeah,
being.
yeah,
And so when it went away, it was like a dissolving of myself.
yeah,
And so it is good to know and to be able to recognize, like, hey, this can lead to this. It
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean, and that's where discernment comes in.
Mhm.
But these are markers. These are red flags. These are, hey, just be paying attention.
Yeah,
Because like I don't think every church that has multiple campuses is necessarily wrong, or has a green room, or has a this, but like
those
when
be,
but those can be signs
yeah.
of, is that pastor untouchable? If the pastor's untouchable, can, if
Are
the,
they submitted and humble to
or
authority and
yeah,
all of that?
when you start things that I don't think either is really thought about as younger believers, but like, how is leadership structure in the church?
Like, you don't think about
Those things. Yeah.
It's just, again, and that's where, so I want to definitely say something, because a lot of times, and we heard this, something that is oftentimes said in response to people who are hurt and even go into deconstruction and potentially completely walk away from the faith because of a church leader who's embroiled in a scandal and has a big fall and all these things, is the response is so often, well, they're just human and that's not God, and hurt people hurt people.
And was your faith in God or in
Your person. And there may be a degree of truth in that, but the delivery and the complete and total lack of empathy there is ridiculous. Because I would first of all challenge anybody who says that to really like run the mental scenario. If you're at a church, like really think through, if this church leader who I really admire, like especially if it's like a smaller church and you're like friends with them and you look up to them and you do lunch and dinner with them and you hang out and all of these things. Like imagine if all of a sudden you found out some horrible, awful thing about them. Like how would that impact you? I think when you're on the other side of it, it's real easy to just say those things. But the reality is, when you go to a church and you submit yourself to leadership,
Yeah.
in a faith, you are trusting them. You are expecting them to be a representative of God and to be equipping the saints. Like
Yep.
that is the biblical calling. There's a standard for elders. There is supposed to be a level of spiritual maturity, a standard, a moral standard that is established by Scripture that they are supposed to be held to. And when they fall short of that, it impacts people. It just does. And so I would really challenge people to, the whole walk a mile in somebody's shoe thing. Imagine what it would be like and have empathy for people. Like you're not going to change somebody's deconstruction journey by telling them, oh, well, people are just evil. It's like, well, yeah,
it's a whole,
or whatever. But
the fallout is immense, and the amount of times I was told, like, you put your faith in the wrong thing, or you should just get back on the horse, basically.
Yeah.
Like get back into the church community. You can't heal outside of the church community.
I didn't put my faith in any person. I put my trust in them.
It's
different. It's a hugely different thing. We should put trust in people. People should be trustworthy.
Yeah. And, we didn't know. We didn't, and I think of, I was brought to Gateway as a high schooler. It was a small church. Like, it wasn't tiny, but we had one campus when it started, or when I started. And so it's a very awkward, uncomfortable thing to go, okay, we went from this to like this huge scandal. And what does that mean about the things I did learn there? The thing, and I don't think everything out of that church was bad. I learned a lot while I was
No, I mean, not every single one of his teachings was off. I mean, there was a lot of like, that's the thing is like, there's a lot of truth and a lot of good. And there was a lot of people that helped and came to the Lord from, a lot of these places. And that's the thing that sucks too, is like, if you come to the faith at a church under leadership, and then like, it's just, it's so damaging.
And this is not something I really want to discuss, but sin impacts.
Yeah.
So when we do things that are against, the law of nature, like when it comes to like, we'll just say with like, the stuff at Gateway or whatever.
Yeah.
Like there is law of the nation that was crossed there, but like there is natural like humanity laws written on our heart.
Yeah.
Broken there. And there are effects that go further out when we do things. It impacts like, what I remember one time the saying ripples to riptides, what do you want to leave in your wake, was like a thing that went off in my head.
Yeah.
Of you can be a calm ripple that like, or you can rip people under with how you act, how you behave. And so when we engage in the world in a certain way, like we have impacts, there is fallout, and again, that's where we both are coming into this, with reverence. I don't know, like trepidation in a way, like
no.
I'm grateful that my mouth was shut at 20 and 22 and 25.
Yeah.
Because I've always wanted to share my story. I've always wanted to encourage others, and I did in blog format.
Yeah.
I have removed some blogs that I looked back and been like, ooh, that did not age well. But the amount of responsibility I feel to encourage, to love people is different at 35 than it was at 25.
Yeah. And, we hold this very, like you said, reverently with trembling. And we also reserve the right to go back and go, hey, we were wrong there. Like, I said some stuff, it was stupid, it was wrong, whatever. And, we aren't perfect. We're not claiming to be
the authority,
perfect, the authorities, the experts on anything. We're just, again, wanting to be storytellers, to open up discussion, give our opinions. There's some things that we hold pretty high, beliefs and standards on, especially like more so from like a theological standpoint. But like, I'd say we're in a culture where people are not allowed to be free from their past. And I think that, again, like there's a balance here where you have things where, there's an accountability and there's consequences to actions from our past that you will be held to.
Yeah.
Especially like, again, in whenever there's crimes committed, whenever there's hiddenness for 20, 30 years about really intense things, there's going to be, 40 years. There's going to be a far greater amount of fallout and all that kind of stuff versus like, if I say, we're doing this podcast now. If we go back to whenever I was in college and some of the things that I said and did, like the whole cancel culture thing, I would be, but the thing is, I'm redeemed. I gave my life to God and I'm not that person anymore.
He also has owned it.
Yeah,
that's the difference.
Exactly. And
like,
so,
because the fallout from sin can be mitigated with confession and humility. Now, mitigated, not completely wiped away, but like the amount of fallout did not need to be to the degree that it was if it had been owned from the get-go. So we can like mitigate the fallout, not completely remove consequences, not completely take away everything, but the amount of fallout wouldn't have to be that big. In the future, we want to do stuff about marriage and different life events, but we're going to be upfront and honest, because if we put on a front that we have a great marriage, but then it comes out that we had some hiccups, people who have looked to us for marriage advice are going to be like, wait, where, it's incongruent. It's that we talked about cognitive dissonance in a different.
It's deception is manipulation.
Yeah. And that's a huge problem. There were marriage ministries and people who would tout that they had this great marriage, but then they fell apart.
And we're still lying about where they were ministering out of a place of my marriage is great, even though they were going through a divorce.
And like, courting the lead of a network. If you haven't been following Daystar Scandal and you want a telenovela, it's wild. It's wild. But I mean, that's the thing, is like, there's a big difference. And so when we come and we are honest and we are authentic in what we're bringing forth, like, the fallout isn't as big. Like, that's.
Well, and again, I think the big problem is that there is an expectation that, see, this is a thing where it's like, there is a standard and expectation that church leaders need to be at, but then there is an additional expectation that they have to be like perfect. And so oftentimes then they're kind of forced into this position of putting on a front and always acting perfect. I mean, there's a degree of transparency in some pastors where they would sometimes talk about how, on my way to go preach, me and my wife were in this massive fight, and then I had to go put on a face like everything's fine. And, I think that there's an element of, you can't be totally emotionally driven at all times, and you have to,
and you don't need to air every little thing.
Exactly. But whenever it's like, it is so hidden, you have basically like two lives. You have a life where, you are your home life, and then your church life. It's like, that's just a problem. And that's something that we're really committed to not doing, is just full vulnerability. And obviously, like, we're not going to just share absolutely everything, but
I mean, the last 10 years, we have been in a hemorrhaging season where, like, if you met us in the last 10 years and we have trauma dumped on you, sorry. Because the reality is that's where we've been. And we're currently at a place where, like, are things perfect? No. But are we healed enough where we don't immediately ooze pus and things? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's wisdom in silence. There's wisdom in giving snippets. If you followed me on social media for any amount of time, you have seen good and bad. Like, I'm not hidden, and I often get told, like, I just love the fact that you don't hide the stuff.
Yeah.
I've never been good at it. And because real is better, and not this fake, we're going to put on a mobile front to get likes, but, like, this is genuinely where I'm at, or this is genuinely.
Yeah.
And so church scandal causes harm.
100%. Yeah.
And to bypass the harm caused to say, well, you just need to get back on the horse and get back into church is damaging.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give people the space to feel it, to grieve it, to walk with them, to be an empathetic witness, and allow them to walk through it. And you need to hold yourself and your leaders to a standard.
Yeah.
Of, we are going to be all about honesty, that we are not going to allow abusive practices to take root. And if they've already been part of the structure, we are going to deconstruct that structure and make it where it's not a thing.
Yeah. Where there's transparency, where there's accountability. I mean, if there's not financial transparency at churches, like if you don't know what your pastor is making,
that's a red flag.
Probably a red flag. Yeah.
And we're just gonna plug this real fast if we're gonna talk about finances. The Religion Business is a docu-series that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
That I've been following them on social media for a while. They're fascinating, brilliant guys.
Love to like
meet with them,
have them, have
Yeah.
a discussion with them. That would be cool. Yeah.
But they're pointing out the red flags of the financial aspect.
Yeah.
And then for the spiritual abuse side, there's the Spiritual Abuse Institute in their podcast, The Church Disrupted. Also, they're going in and they're spotlighting stuff, not to crap all over the church, but to say, hey, this can't remain.
Yeah, like we have to do better. The church should be a disruptor of the culture, not because we're like breaking these scandals constantly and people want nothing to do with us, but because we're so
different,
powered by God and different that like we're
attractive.
Yeah,
like it's
either attractive or people want to kill us.
Yeah,
and not because again that we're like molesting children, but because
those people should never mind.
Yeah. But they should be wanting to kill us because we're like so empowered by God. And
we're offending the spiritual realm
principalities.
Like
they're waging war. Instead, they're like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great.
Yeah, please, by all means, keep making a fool of yourself.
Yeah,
good job.
Yeah.
That is very much, and I kind of open on that. Let's probably end there. Of like, we're meant to disrupt the culture.
Yeah,
like Jesus came in and disrupted the culture. That's why the government, although they didn't have a reason to kill him, like that's why they did it. Like that is why it was a thing. Is it completely turned the religious institution and the governmental institution on its head in that day.
Yeah.
And that's why I made this reference this morning of the underground churches in enclosed countries. Like they are persecuted. We are not persecuted here in America, at least not yet. Hopefully it'll stay that way to the degree. Although I don't know.
Yeah, I've got mixed thoughts on that, but we won't dive into that.
Yeah, maybe a coffee chat for another day. We aren't persecuted right now. Some people say Merry Christmas is not persecution. Us not having whatever, the different things I've heard, that's not persecution. And the underground church in China and the church in Iran and all the places throughout the Middle East, they are true disruptors to their culture. And that is what we're supposed to be here in America.
Yeah.
And we're not. And that is gutting.
Yeah. And I think, that's obviously a huge thing. And again, like I think that's where God is shifting and refining. And that's in a big way why so much of this stuff is coming to light. It's just we're at this point, tipping point where it's going to go one way or the other. And do we want to dive into any other reasons why people deconstruct? I can't remember what we had on the list.
Well, we just basically listed off a lot of the different scandals that have happened, so and I think
focused on church scandals. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like
because we did teachings, but
yeah, there could be any number of things, and there could be things that are not even necessarily church related. Like you could have, some sort of abuse situation that happens within your family. You can have political things. You can have all sorts of things that cause you to question. I think just the most kind of obvious and damaging ones directly do involve the church because, well,
that's what we're talking about is deconstructing.
Yeah, deconstructing
your Christian faith because that's our wheelhouse. That's what we understand. Because like we said, we're sharing our stories.
Yeah,
not other people.
Yes. Yep.
So
that's what we experienced exactly.
So it's probably way longer than I had anticipated.
Well, it's fine.
Okay. But we were really glad you're here. Like we've said, and we'll probably sound like a broken record. Please follow, like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the little bell so you know that we're coming. But it really does, it helps a lot. It helps get our message out. It will hopefully allow us to continue creating more content. And
yeah. I mean, that's the game plan, and that's just kind of the reality of things. Is that, it's hard to put the amount of effort and time into something, doing it fully for free. It's kind of one of those things where whenever you start to mix ministry and money, that can be messy, and we don't.
I don't want to call us a ministry.
No, I don't know what we are. We're two people talking,
sharing life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, because I don't necessarily think everything's going to be so church focused.
No, I mean, it's not, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
About all sorts of stuff.
But to share, we can call it our art form right now.
Yes.
It's our gabbing. Yeah. But like, to put effort into something does take time, energy, finances.
Yep.
And one of the ways that you can not pay us, but help us is to like, subscribe.
And share it with people that you know. So
thank you so much. And we will see you next time.